Stitch Cuties, I'm Brittany with Stitches of Love Quilting, and in this video tutorial we're going to be working on making the checkered borders in our embroidery machine out of our finishing kit for Garden Moments Box 13, and we're going to use files 13 through 19. So before we get started with anything, I want to talk about how to organize all of your beautiful fabrics. So first up, for file 13, 14, and 15, we're actually making 3 borders. We're making our left checkerboard border, we're making our top checkerboard border, and our bottom checkerboard border. So I want to make sure that I have one of each color in the top, left, and bottom border, and we'll talk about the right border in a minute. It's separate. So we're going to make file 13 3 times, we're going to make file 14 3 times. File 15, however, is just a short little segment, and we're making it just one time because you're going to make one segment for each of the borders at a time. So you'll make 3 at one time. So I want to organize my fabrics. So the first time I use file 13, I need 6 assorted prints. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. For each time I'm going to make file 13, I'm going to use the same fabrics. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it doesn't matter which ones, I just want them to be the same so that, and when we make it, I'll mix them up, but I want to have the same in the pile so that each time I'm using that file, I'm going to have representation of the colors evenly in my borders is essentially what I'm trying to do. So now for file 14, each of the 3 times that I make it, I need to have 4 colors. So I'm just going to grab the next 4 colors in my pile. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see I'm laying them off to the side in an order, and then all 4. So file 13, file 14. Now for number 15, I have 1 fabric left out of my pile of 11, but if you remember on some of the colors, 3 of the colors, we cut an extra piece. We cut 5 instead of 4. So from a pile, I'm just gonna grab 3 colors. And at this point, it doesn't matter which one, but you don't want it to be the same one that's already in there. And I don't want to have another turquoise. So let's do, I like pinks. Let's do a pink, and I like this fun print. It doesn't matter which of the 3 that you cut extra on, just put that in this pile. And if it happens to be a duplicate, trade this duplicate out across the board in your other piles, right? So what you're putting in file 15 will differ amongst your piles. So now I know what I'm doing for 13, 14, and 15 files. Now let's talk about 16, 17, and 18. So I have a pile of 11 right here. I'm gonna need that entire pile to use for numbers 16 and 17 and 18. And then if I need anything else, I have my extras I can pull from. But this should be all that I need is this pile. And the reason for that is that 16, 17, and 18 all make just the right side of the border. So having the pile of each individual color gives me all the colors that I need, right? So that pile of 11 is perfect for use on those 3 files. And again, it doesn't matter what order you use them in those files. So I'm gonna set that aside as well. Now we're going to talk about file number 19. That is our 4 corners. So 2 of them are gonna be the checkerboard and 2 of them are gonna be an assorted color. Again, it doesn't matter what color you use. I'm just gonna pick randomly out of my pile. I like red and I like purple. So there we go. No rhyme or reason to it. Pick from what you have remaining, okay? And you can all, I think from your fabric, you'll have plenty of extra if you like wanna grab different things. So set that aside. This is what I need for the file number 19. And then, of course, all of my checkerboards are the blue plaid squares are exactly the same for all of them. So just keep that on one giant pile and it'll all make sense as we go through. So what I'm gonna do is organize myself off to the side what we're doing for each one. So I have my pile for number 13, pile for number 14, pile for number 15, and then 16, 17, and 18, and then I have my 19. You'll have more space at your workspace. I'll organize that a little more for myself in a moment. And so now you're gonna be ready to go. And that way, the whole goal of doing this like weird exercise with our squares was so that we have a pretty even representation of those different colors in each border. So now we'll move our pattern aside. We're going to take our hoop we are going to load some Sulky Tear Easy Stabilizer, and we're gonna get started on file number 13 first. Okay, so for file 13, it looks very similar to all the other borders we've done. So you have your outside trim line that's ultimately gonna guide you, and you have your inside batting. So you are going to put a 1.5 by 10 inch piece of batting right in the center here and here. And we're not gonna put fabric on just yet. When we put this on, our machine is now gonna give us a guideline where we're going to put our pieces. So I do need to secure my batting a little bit, unlike how I haven't needed to do that in the other. So I'm just gonna do a little bit, and then just stand with your machine and be a little cognizant. It's gonna come a little bit down here. So just be with your machine for a moment while you're putting those first pieces in place. Okay, so what you have in your hoop now is your batting just loosely sitting there, and you have a line across the top for each of them. Now we have our pile, remember, that we made for file 13 to use for one use of file 13. So the first piece we need to put down is any assorted print. So we're just gonna line that up at this line, and you can see you have plenty extra going over the sides and the top of our stitching. We're gonna take a second assorted print, doesn't matter at all which print. And again, it's going past that outer stitched rectangle. Then we're gonna take one of our super cute blue plaid prints, and we're gonna place it right on top. And now what our machine is going to do is give us our 1/4 inch seam allowance right across both of these. If you want to put some tape right here, you definitely can. Okay, so you can see you have your 2 seam lines. So what you're going to do is take the plaid and pull it down, give it a little finger press, and now we're going to take our iron, and you can press, and we're fusing it to the batting. I'm not gonna go all the way down on the blue plaid because we will have some we need to trim off when we do our next step, about 1/2 inch or so. So then same thing with the left, give it a little finger press right here. And then we're going to fuse it to our fusible batting, and then iron not all the way to the bottom on your blue plaid. If you want to put a little bit of tape to secure this, you can. I feel good about mine, so I'm not taping, but that's a total personal decision. So what's gonna stitch next is a white rectangle, and then our quilting in both squares. So throughout the entire border, what we've done in the assorted prints, we have a really fun straight line that mimics the straight line quilting and the sashing of our applique borders. And then we have a cross hatch on our blue plaid print, which matches all of the cross hatching that we did in our sashing and blue plaid borders. So it's gonna be really cute. So watch your machine do the quilting, and we'll be back to do our next step. Okay, so take a look up close. The quilting looks so good and matches what we've been doing in other places of the quilt. So now this little extra area where we didn't press, remember? Now we need to trim that. So I just have my scissors out right here, and I want to carefully trim right across the bottom. There we go. And on this guy, careful not to cut your batting. Don't want to do that. There we go. So now we're going to take, this is a guideline for us, the bottom of this rectangle. So just grab 2 more assorted prints from your pile, and we're gonna line it up right across that stitched line, and then another one right here. And with the lines, it doesn't matter if they go this way or this way. Don't worry about it. Just put it however you like it. I'm going this way. And so there we go. And again, you can see that your piece of fabric is extended past the left and right sides of these stitch lines, and it's lined up with the bottom of your rectangle. So now when we put this back on, our machine is gonna give us our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we have our seam allowance stitched, so it's time to simply pull our fabric down, give a little finger press, and then actually press it with your iron. And you don't wanna go all the way down. Remember, we're gonna have a little bit to trim. And same thing right here. There we go. So I'm leaving about a 1/2 inch or so not pressed down there at the bottom. Okay, so now when we put this back on, our machine is going to do a little bit of quilting for us. It's gonna do that straight line, and then the bottom of that straight line of the quilting is gonna give us our guide for our next piece, which would be the blue plaid. Okay, so take a look. Those are now quilted. Looks good. We're moving on along. I am going to now trim again. Can you still see? Yes, wanted to make sure I was still in the camera view. So now, just like we did up here, we're gonna trim this excess. And then that bottom of the stitching will be our guideline for placing our blue plaid. And again, don't cut your batting. There we go. And right across here. There we go. So now you're gonna take a piece of blue plaid and we're gonna put it right across the bottom of that line. And same thing right here. And again, the left and right sides are extending past that outer stitch rectangle because ultimately those are gonna be our trim lines. So now when we put this back on, we'll have our 1/4 inch seam allowance stitched. So now our 1/4 inch seam allowance is stitched and we are going to simply finger press our fabric down and then give it a press with the iron. Not all the way down. You wanna make sure that you have room to trim down here. And same thing right here. There we go. And when we put this back on, our super cute crosshatch quilting will be quilted over both of these little blue plaid prints. Okay, so now these have their quilting on them. And so we are going to trim this excess fabric of the blue plaid right along the bottom. There we go. And we'll trim right here. There we go. And now we're gonna put our final 2 prints in place. And it doesn't matter which one you put where, there's no rhyme or reason to it. So right above that little line, or right at that line for the bottom, right here is where we're lining up our prints. And when we put this back on, the machine is gonna give us our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we have our perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we are simply going to fold this down, finger press it, and then give it a press with the iron. And then the same thing for the other piece. There we go. This is so cute, isn't it? I love the checkerboard border, and I really love the quilting all tying in together. So when we put this back on, the machine is gonna do the last step of file 13, and that is to do the straight line quilting on these 2 squares. Alrighty, take a look. Let's look up close at all of our quilting. It looks so good. And so we have 2 segments already quilted and ready to go for our border. So remember, this is file 13. You're gonna repeat this file 3 times total. I'm a bit of a labeler, so what I would do, since we did put a little bit of effort into sorting our squares, I would label this file 13-1, and then when I do it the second time, I'd label it file 13-2 and file 13-3 for my 3rd time, just to kind of keep myself a little organized if I don't maybe finish this all in one day. So now we're gonna rehoop, we're gonna load the file for number 14, and we'll start on our next section of borders. Okay, so now we're working on file 14. If you remember, we're gonna make this one a total of 3 times, and we have piles set up for that for file 14. So we have 4 assorted colors, and then you're just gonna pull from your master pile of the blue plaid prints. So for the batting size that we're putting in, it's 1.5 by 9.5. And look, did I grab the wrong pile? I sure did. 1 second. 1.5 by 9.5. Grab from my pile that I've cut for myself. There we go. That fits better, doesn't it? So fusible side up so that it's going to fuse to all of our fabrics as we go. And if you want to put a little bit of tape, you can. A little bit down is where we're going to have a guideline stitch on each one. I like to just stand at my machine and you see where your foot's about to go and just carefully keep this in place. Okay? Okay, so now for file 14, we have our first guideline, and what we're gonna do is take blue plaid, and we are going to put it face up, and we're gonna line it up with that line, and then you're gonna make sure it's going past all this stitched rectangle. So it goes above and to the left and right sides, and do the same thing right there. So lines up at that stitched line and exceeds the rectangle where we're gonna trim ultimately at the end. And then we're gonna grab 2 prints, and we are gonna put it face down right on top of that. And now we're ready to go for our first 1/4 inch seam allowance to be stitched. Okay, so now what we're going to do, just like we did for 13, but now we're on 14, We're gonna finger press this down, and we're going to give it a press to fuse it to the fusible, and not all the way down because we are gonna have some excess we need to trim. And then we'll do the same thing right here for this side. And when we put this back on, the machine is going to do the crosshatch quilting on the blue plaid and the straight line quilting on our 2 assorted prints. Okay, so now everything is stitched and looks super good. We are going to trim the excess below the stitching on our 2 assorted prints right here. And then we will take our blue plaid and we'll put them face down right on top. So grab your 2 pieces, face down right on that bottom stitched line, and then make sure it's lined up on the side so it's extending past the outer rectangle, and do the same thing right here. Now your machine will give you your next 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so it's time to fold the fabric down, give it a little finger press, and we'll iron almost all the way down to the bottom, but remember we'll have some we need to trim off. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. There we go. And a little press. Now when we put this back on, the machine is gonna give us our crosshatch quilting on the blue plaid prints. Okay, so now you have your super cute crosshatch quilting, and it is time to trim the excess across the bottom, just like so. And do that on this side as well. Now we're gonna take our remaining 2 prints from our pile for file 14 for the first time we're stitching it, and we are going to put them right in place, face down at that bottom of the stitched line, and just like so. And again, they're gonna be extending past the rectangles on the left and right so that you know they're gonna be part of your row. And next, our seam allowance will stitch for us. Okay, so now it is time to fold our fabric down, give a little finger press, and with your iron, fuse it to your fusible batting almost all the way down, but not quite, because you will need to trim a little excess at the bottom. There we go. So cute. So now when we put this back on, we are going to have our straight line quilting on both of these assorted prints. Okay, so now those are quilted. It is time to trim off the excess. I have a little string right here I want to trim. There we go. So we'll trim the bottom just like so. And right across here. And then we're going to put our last piece of fabric on, which is the blue plaid print. So grab 2 pieces of that, and 1 right here and 1 on this side. And I'm sure you know what's coming next, our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we have that seam allowance stitched. We are going to fold this down and press it completely, and then do the same thing right here. And then our machine will do the last step, which is stitching our beautiful crosshatch quilting on the blue plaid. Okay, so you're all done with file 14. Take a look. Everything looks so good. And now remember, you're going to make this file 14 a total of 3 times, and you have your organized piles from at the beginning to refer to make those. So now let's rehoop and begin working on file 15. Okay, so now we're working on file 15. There are 3 rectangles. The batting sizes that you need are the 1.5 by 6 inch batting lengths, and you're gonna put it fusible side up right in the center. Now we're only gonna make this file 1 time because each of these 3 will be used for the left, top, and bottom border. So remember we organized our pieces earlier at the beginning, and make sure you have fusible side up. There we go. And so now the first thing that's gonna happen across the 3, you're going to have a line that is going to be where we initially put our pieces down. So again, as your machine works its way over, just be careful and hold your batting in place so it doesn't get hit by the foot of your machine. And then we'll be back to start putting on our fabrics. Okay, so we have our guidelines. And so what we're gonna put down first is one of our super cute prints. So we're gonna put it where it lines up with that line that just stitched. And then on the left and right sides and across the top, it goes beyond that original stitched line. There we go. And now we're gonna take a blue plaid square, and we are gonna put that face down on top, just like so. And then our machine will do our 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we'll be back to press this out. Okay, so we have our 1/4 inch seams, and so what we're gonna do, finger press down our fabric and then iron almost all the way to the bottom, but leave a little bit not ironed so that you can easily trim away your seam allowance on the next step. There we go. Super easy. Isn't this fun to do? I really enjoy piecing stuff like this in the hoop. And then our last one right here. So now when we put this back on with the white thread, the machine is going to secure these in place and do our straight line quilting and our crosshatch quilting. Okay, so now we're ready to trim. Everything's stitched right here, looking beautiful. And so we are just gonna cut this excess off right here out of our seam allowance. And cut across here. There we go, and one more. There we go. So now we are going to take our 3 remaining from our pile of our cute little prints, and we're gonna put it right on top, face down. There's no rhyme or reason for what you put where. I'm putting the red here just because I don't want to have 2 turquoises. Why not, right? There we go. So when we put this back on, we'll have our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now we have our 1/4 inch seams stitched. It is time to simply fold these down and give them a press. And then on the next step, our machine is going to quilt these with the straight line quilting. And I must say, when it comes to the stripes, you can put them any direction, it doesn't matter. They look cute and the border is going both ways. So every time that I've come across a stripe in this, I just kind of alternate which way I'm going. So one time I did sideways, one time I did up and down. This happens to be up and down again, even though in my mind I was alternating, but it doesn't matter which way you do your stripes at all. Just want to let you know, none of the fabric is directional. Have fun with it. Okay, so let's put this on and have the machine do the final stitching. Okay, so now we're all done with file number 15. So we have one border piece for our left, top, and bottom checkered borders that we'll use this with. And you will trim it per your pattern to the 2 inches by 6.5 inches. So now we are going to reload and start on file number 16. Okay, so now we're working on file 16. We're only making one of these. So we are going to put our batting right in place. This is 1.5 inches by 10 inches, and just put it right in place. Now mine look a little long. I'm gonna give it just a trim. It's okay. Sometimes when you're working with batting, you might accidentally stretch it a little. So that's probably what happened there. There we go. Is that one a little long? Nope, it's good. Okay, so now the machine is gonna do a little guideline across the front of both of them. So just watch it on your machine and let's get going. Okay, so we have our first placement line, and what we are going to do first is take 2 of our blue plaids, and we are going to put them face up, and you line it up with the line, and then of course make sure it's going past the rectangle. And the same right here. Now we're going to take 2 of our assorted prints and put it right down on top of it, and then our machine will give us our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now all we do is fold down our fabric and give it a press. You'll want to press almost all the way to the bottom, but not quite, because remember we will be trimming some of the excess fabric away as we work our way down. There we go. And now our machine is going to do the first little bit of quilting on these pieces. Okay, so everything is quilted on these little squares, so it is time to trim the excess fabric right here out of our little seam allowance. There we go. And then we're going to take a blue plaid square and place it face down, just like so. There we go. Again, make sure it's extending past the left and right side lines. And there we go. So now, you know the drill. We're going to have our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we have our seam allowances stitched. It's time to simply fold this down, press almost all the way to the bottom of the square, leave some unpressed so it's easy to trim. There we go. And now our machine will do our beautiful quilting, the crosshatch quilting on the blue plaid pieces. Okay, so now our crosshatch quilting is done on those 2 squares. So we're going to trim the excess fabric below them. There we go. And right here as well. And now what we'll do is take two assorted of our fun colors, and we're gonna place them face down, right sides together, and then we'll have our 1/4 inch seam allowance stitched. Okay, so our seam allowance is stitched. We're gonna fold this down, and again, press almost all the way to the bottom of it, but not quite, because we will have some to trim. There we go. Now our really cute straight line quilting will be completed on these two assorted squares. Now it's time to trim the excess fabric off the bottom of what just stitched. There we go. And then we will put our two final pieces of the blue plaid in place. So grab two pieces and put them face down, just like so. And now we're ready for our final 1/4 inch seam allowance of this file. Okay, so now that final seam allowance is stitched, so it is time to fold our fabric down and press. You can press all the way to the end now. And our machine will do the final stitching of file 16, which is the crosshatch quilting on the two blue plaid pieces. Okay, take a look. File 16 is now done. You only have to make this one once, so you're truly done. You will trim it to 2 inches by 10.5 inches as instructed in the pattern. Now we are going to move on and make number 17. So let's rehoop and get started. Okay, so now for file 17, we have our two rectangles. The batting size that we're putting in is 1.5 by 9.5. So we're going to simply put that right in place. And then as always, our machine is going to give us one straight line to give us our initial guideline. Okay, so now we have our initial guideline, and what we'll be working with for file 17 first is going to be an assorted print right above here. And again, make sure it goes off the sides and the top. And then another assorted print just on top. And then we'll put a blue plaid and a blue plaid square and have our 1/4 inch seam allowance stitched for us. Okay, so now we will fold this down, give a press almost all the way to the bottom of it. Leave a little bit so it's easy to trim. And the same for right here. There we go. And now our machine is going to do our beautiful quilting for us. Okay, so now that is quilted out, it is time to trim the excess right here. And then we will put our two next assorted pieces in place for those to be quilted. Super cute. There we go. So just grabbing what's next in line. We have a pink and a fun green. Which way should I do the stripes, y'all? I'm trying to alternate them, and then I forget what I did last time. So we're going this way. So now our 1/4 inch seam will stitch next. Okay, so now it's time to press these down, just like so. And again, leave a little bit unpressed so it's easier to trim. There we go. And now our machine will do our straight line stitching on these two squares for us. Okay, so now it's time to trim the excess below what just was quilted. There we go. And the excess right here. And now we'll put a blue plaid square on top of each. There we go. Just like so, and just like so. And now our 1/4 inch seam will be stitched. Okay, now we have our seam allowance stitched. It's time to fold this down and give it a press. I was so in the flow of it, you guys. I almost just pressed it without filming. That would have been bad. So now the machine will do our crosshatch quilting on our blue plaid. Okay, so now we simply trim the excess down here, and we'll put on our last assorted print pieces for file 17. This is super cute. I've really enjoyed making all these borders, I must say. So now we have two prints going right sides together or face down. There we go. And we're ready for our 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so now we simply fold this down, give it a nice press with the iron. And now our machine will do the last step of file 17, which is the straight line quilting on the two assorted prints. And just like that, file 17 is all done. Quilting looks amazing. And so you are going to trim these two pieces of your border to 2 inches by 10 inches as instructed in the pattern. And now it is time to move on to file number 18. So let's reload and get going on that. Okay, so we have one rectangle right in the center of our hoop for file 18, and we are going to place one 1.5 by 6 inch piece of batting right in the center, and then our machine is going to give us our first guideline. Okay, so we have that first guideline right here. We are going to first take a blue plaid square, plop it down right above the line or right on the line, and making sure it exceeds past the top and left and right sides. And then we'll take one assorted print and put it right on top for our 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we have that first seam stitched. We're gonna simply fold this down and give a press almost all the way down. Leave a little bit so that you can trim, and let's go watch our machine quilt for us. Okay, so now we are going to trim the excess from below what just quilted, and then we will put a blue plaid print right in place for our next 1/4 inch seam allowance to stitch. Okay, so now we will fold down the final piece. Make sure my batting is in place. Fold this down and give a little press for our machine to do the final quilting of file 18. And now file 18 is all done. So we are moving on to our last and final file, which is file 19, and we are going to make our 4 little corner blocks of our checkered border. Okay, so now for file 19, we're making our 4 corners. So we have our little 1.5 inch fusible battings. Are they not adorable? Put those right in place. Now make sure you know the orientation of your file and your hoop, because 2 need to be the blue plaid fabric and 2 squares need to be your assorted print. So the way I have it oriented is my 2 blue plaids are up here and my 2 assorted prints are down here. So it's super easy. Plop it in place. It's way bigger than you need it to be. So just plop it right over. Plop, plop, plop. So easy. There we go. And we're just gonna lightly press each one. If you wanna give a little tape, you can. There we go. And then our machine is just gonna simply quilt each of these 4 corner squares for us. Easy peasy. Ta-da! You are all done. You have your 2 blue plaid, your 2 assorted print, and these are the corners of your borders for the corner blocks. Super, super cute for the checkered borders. So now you're all done with all of your embroidery files. It's time for you to go assemble your quilt. So happy stitching, and I hope you enjoyed this.